Well, good afternoon, ladies. Are y'all all awake, or are you ready for a little nap? Here he is ready. Well, in most of our programs, we do break down as in a circle of women, and we are blessed to have the ambiance of the fire. But we just try to use this time. It can be a very rich time because questions that each of you have many times are questions that all of us have. So I'm just going to begin by pulling, I'm going to mix these up some, pulling these out. I am not a person who is telling you I have the answers. If I have something to give about it, I will. If I don't, I'll say, go to your preacher's wife or something along that line. Okay. This first one, oh wow, this is a very, very good one. We've not had this question before, but how can I emotionally detach from past relationships? That is a very good one. Because all of us, many of us in past relationships, we did not have kids, we did not have all those great responsibilities that we carry now, and we can look back and say, wow, maybe I should have, or that sort of thing. But I think those of us who walk with the Lord, we're required to. We are just required to. And I think of that scripture, forgetting what lies behind and reaching for the prize that is before us. But ladies, honestly, I look at a question like this kind of like I look at forgiveness. In my earlier days as being a Christian, and there were lots of messages on forgiveness. I mean, I remember hearing one is you stick a stake in the ground and you say, I forgive, and that's it. Well, I found a stake and I stuck it in the ground. And I didn't forgive. Plain the stake did not do one thing for me. But what the Lord showed me during that season in my life, and I had a very deep unforgiveness. But one day I heard him say, I want you to start forgiving a moment at a time. Just when it comes up, I want you just to forgive at that moment. Well, that wasn't a huge assignment. But I can tell you this. The first week, it could have been 30 or 40 times a day, because that's what unforgiveness, it wants to chew you up and spit you out. But nonetheless, because I believed I had heard the Lord's voice, I began doing that. The first week, it stayed pretty much the same. The second week, all of a sudden, I began to notice that it wasn't coming up as often. And I didn't really think that much about it. And the third week passed. Now, I'm giving you the timetable it happened with me because I think God knew my desperation. But all of a sudden, after about week 4 or 5, I reached down into that awful place to visit my unforgiveness, and it was gone. I mean, who can explain that? I can't. But I think visiting past relationships and the way things were when life was easier and someone may have seemed very much kinder and everything, it has to be done in that realm. I mean, I do believe there are people who all of a sudden say, I forgive, and it's gone. But that is not always the case. And it is not always the case with past relationships. Now that we have Facebook, I've even had to, because I worked in a lot of different realms, and all of a sudden people pop up and say, gosh, I've wondered about you through the years, or this, that, and the other. But it is a discipline not to go there. It really is. I don't care how spiritual you are or anything. And so I don't know. I think when the Lord says today is evil enough in itself, Today is what I deal with. It's what we all deal with in the Lord. If we go forward, I personally have had a hard time finding grace there. If I go back with him, I don't find the grace there. But today is enough. Despite my best efforts, I still struggle with getting really angry when my husband does something again that he said he would not do anymore. Help. Yeah. Well, there again, there are just some things that we can face. And I would ask whoever asked this, if you and your husband are able to pray when that moment comes up and just say, this is not right before the Lord. And can we just stop a minute and not go there and just say, Lord, help us right now at this moment. Because that in and of itself quenches a very heavy flame. Usually something like this, y'all, when it keeps coming back, I know there are times when Larry has said, you need to tell me if I'm doing that. And so I've had to learn to go ahead and tell him. But it's an act of maturity that the anger does not come back in again. And it's one thing to grab your husband's hand and say, we're at it, we're doing this again, you're doing this again. Can we just sit down a minute and resolve this? And what steps can we take now to stop this? Because so many times it just turns into, there you go again. I don't even want to hear what you have to say. That's our human reaction. But it's another thing, and I love that scripture. I don't practice it as much as I should. A kind answer turns away wrath. But sometimes just grabbing your mate's hand and saying, let's not do this again. Will you hear my heart in it? Because I can't talk to you when you get in that place. And there just comes that time when a husband or a wife have to reach that place where they're willing to sit down and go through what it will take. But most of the time it starts out more with this, grabbing a hand rather than accusations and that sort of thing. Some of this is just so practical. And each of us have a different identity in our marriages. So I don't know if that helps at all, but it sure is a good beginning place. And, if your husband is unwilling, then I believe there does come a place where you don't visit that place with him anymore. And you just have to get out of the way and let God get to him. I know Sally used to tell this story. It was wonderful. She would pray to God that God would change Jay and everything. And she said every time God was getting ready to do that, she said, I got in the way. It was like I got in the middle. And when God's fist of correction or everything was going towards Jay, Sally said, I got in the middle and I'm the one that got the smack. She said, finally I figured out if I got out of the way and let God get to my husband, things would change. And they did. So I think sometimes we ladies really can get in the middle of what God is trying to get to in our husbands. We all have our different tools for dealing with these kind of things. But I really think if we have the Lord in view, it helps us. It just helps. And to me, it's kind of like when you have PMS, you know what it is, but it just doesn't even matter. And So that's the way it is true. I mean, does it, and it's the same way with anger or whatever. I know I'm not supposed to feel this way, but I do. And so we do have to learn how to mature in those areas. We have a peripheral family member, like a nephew, something like, a far-off nephew. But he was allowed to have tantrums when he was a kid. And, of course, no one knew that when he married one of our family members. But he continued to have tantrums on into his 30s. And, y'all, do you know how unbecoming that is to see a man have tantrums and just lose it? And, well, the words would come flying out. He would get red in the face. It was just, I will do this. I will have my way in this. Da, 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 da. And it was just an adult tantrum. Actually, it was a childish tantrum. But that's why it's so good. And we're not going to get into parenting this week. But if you deal with it when your kids are down at this level, it makes all the difference in the world when they're, as you're getting to walk through all this, because we all have. But the truth of the matter is we ended up having wonderful teenage years with our kids because they were little stinkers when they were smaller. But I would much rather deal with down here than teenagers climbing out the window or slamming doors and that kind of thing. Okay, how do you continue to grow in trust and love with your spouse? Again, that is a day-by-day process. It just is. I think when you have, Larry talked about the agreement thing, when two of you agree touching any one thing, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. I think, number one, I think the rough times can do one or two things to us. It can cause us to go further apart, or it can bring us together in such a wonderful, wonderful way that never can be erased. The other thing is, it's making it a practice. I mean, if you mention to a man, if you say, I need to talk to you, a man's reaction is, oh my gosh, here comes 3 hours. That's their automatic way of looking at it. But growing in trust with your spouse can happen in 3 minutes in the morning time before both of you have to rush off or do whatever it is you have to do. But it's just developing that one place, whether, for Larry and I, it was always at night, because we didn't have, I was always up here at the inn, cooking, preparing breakfast, getting the kids off to school before we came to the inn. We had, as we've told you before, we had our children very quickly. And, when you've got crying kids standing around you, it's a very difficult thing to have that time. So we established that time after we got the kids in bed. Sometimes it was 5 minutes. Sometimes it was 30 minutes or whatever the occasion called for. But just to have that time that you can grow together, and just growing together in the today of our lives. Because today, I know that we will grow together today because it's a day we've not ever lived before. And tomorrow will be as well. But every day gives us a chance to grow, even if it's this much. I mean, you don't plant a seed and then have an orange tree with all this fruit the next day. It's a process of growing. And that can be such a beautiful and wonderful part of marriage, is to feel yourself grow. Because I think many times we can dump too much fertilizer on ourselves, on our marriage, and it burns the plant up. Let's do all this spiritual stuff now. The truth of the matter is, We can't, because we haven't allowed ourselves to grow. You would never think of looking at that little boy, 1-year-old, to put him down at night and to go in the next morning and he'd be a 16-year-old. It's not going to happen. And it's the same way in marriage. It's going to grow little by little, day by day, but it really is a wonderful experience once you can begin to see the little fruit come out on it. After having kids, the intimacy or desire to be intimate, not in a sexual way, has dwindled. When he kisses me, it's more of an annoyance. How do I get the desire for physical touch to give physical touch again? That's a very good question. It's a very real question. And there again, I hate to use the word, it's a discipline, but so much of this comes down to that. And usually a question like this might come more from a man than even a woman. But I think after we have kids, our hearts go in different places now. We're caregivers. And we love something, as much, if not more, than our husbands. But I think sometimes I have to be reminded, and Larry has said this a couple of times this week, that we don't make covenant with our children. God never asked us to. He never asked us to make covenant with our jobs or anything else. But he did ask us to make covenant with our spouse. And knowing that, just beginning again to even, I hate to use the word practice, but to begin again, just to be able to hold for 2 seconds with it. Or if he kisses you, even though now, whereas before it was not an annoyance, now it is. But, ladies, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that our husbands need a touch, just like we need a touch. But sometimes when we don't feel like a touch or anything like that, just being married requires to begin that discipline. And as we do that as unto the Lord, I'm so glad Paul added that part to Ephesians, because if that had not been there, I would have probably gotten a big F on a lot of things. Failed. But those of us who are gathered here in this circle, we know the Lord. And we have as unto the Lord. That makes all the difference in the world. And it just helps us get through a crucial time. And I know after having a baby, y'all, I hate to admit this, but I will. When I was pregnant with our first, we went to the Lamaze classes, and I would go. When we were leaving to go to the hospital, I had my hair sprayed and teased. I had lipstick. I had mascara and eyeliner on. Don't ask me where I got this from. I guess it's because my mom was already gone on to be with the Lord. But, I started out with the paints, and I was like, Well, let me tell you, Larry, at one point, he leaned over me and he said, "Look at me, breathe like this." And I said, "Shut up." I said, "I am going home. Get me off this bed right now. I'm not doing this." I'm very embarrassed to tell you this. Oh, really? And so I was getting ready to sling my feet over the side of the bed, and here comes the mother of all contractions. And I'm back like this again. And he started laughing. And I was lying there in a contraction. I was saying, "Don't you dare, Don't you dare. I will never forgive you for this. But this wickedness that I was, and here my hair got messed up. I knew mascara was running down my face because water was gushing out of my eyes. But where was I going with this, y'all? Let's see. What was the question?
As under the law, yes.
You were having the baby first.
Had the baby, yeah. My two sisters, their labors, they went in 2 hours later, they had babies. My first one, 27 hours. Nikki was 13 hours. The twins were a lot less. We didn't know we were going to have twins, but, oh yeah, we've had some. Maybe we should just have a session about telling about birthing babies. It'd be really fun to hear everybody's story. Pat's had 8. She could tell us a few. Yeah. But anyway, after you have a baby, I remember thinking, I thought, I'm not ever doing this again. Forget, I'm not doing this again. And so, you're still in that mode. And so it takes some time to come out of that for many women, not all women. My older sister, she was 2 hours later standing at the little window looking at the baby, and Leith was just, she should have had it. She had 5. She should have had a dozen, But she was just that kind of good stock. I was not. But anyway, they were all worth it, can I tell you? But the Bible tells us it's like a woman in travail. She forgets the pain for the joy set before her. And sometimes life is that way. It is like being in a travail. But you do forget. It's like the dark time I went through. And I remember that it was bad, but I don't remember how bad. And that's the way childbirth is. You forget. You remember it hurt, but you don't remember how badly it hurt. Would you just share funny stories with your husband?
Did he quit laughing?
Oh, he still tells that story. And I grabbed him. He was leaning over me, and I grabbed him by the collar. And I was saying, don't you dare laugh. And he had that green mask on, they make you wear in there. These were back in the olden days. Now they probably don't even make you do such things. But, yeah. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
Oh, no, you don't want me to go there.
Okay, we'll just move on then. Okay. Husband without vision, dreams, goals. Wife with vision, dreams, and goals. The conflict this creates. Oh, yes. That is probably the worst of the worst conflicts. Here again, if your husband does know the Lord, and that does not mean that, it used to be there was a day when people would say, oh, he's a Christian, go to him, this doctor or this person or whatever. And I would, go. Well, I don't do that anymore. I'm ashamed to say that I don't. It should mean more to me, but Christians, there are places in each of us that really need to be visited by the Lord. And when the Word says the two of us become one, that means that your visions, that He should be able to become one in those visions and those dreams, and vice versa. Honestly speaking, y'all are going to find I'm probably too honest, but I would not be here today if it had not been for Larry's vision and dreams. But I just could not be responsible for not being able to help him fulfill his vision and dream. Let me tell you, I've come very close a couple of times. But I think that is something. In the midst of that, we had to learn for him to also become a part of mine. And have we fully arrived there? No. But we do visit that place. He let me, and I say this, y'all, I ran for Senate, okay? And we both had to decide whether to do that. But at that time, in 2008, I just needed a broadening. And of all things to choose that, let me tell you, it was broad. I should have started a little bit less, but
State or U.S. Senate?
a state senate. And y'all, my name was on all these signs. Wait, you see those mountains out there? You would not believe where he went. And I didn't even know those places existed, but he took Burkett along with him. He went out, he put signs everywhere. He was right there with me through the whole thing. And I'll just never forget it, because he had to sacrifice a lot for me to do that. And I'm so grateful that he joined me in that, because it was a dream. I did not win. That was the first year Obama won. One Republican who was the head of the elevator department, she was the only Republican in the state of North Carolina that won. But you know what? I really didn't want to win. I mean, I acted like I did. I gave speeches. I loved the debate, all that kind of thing. But I knew I would not want to be away from Larry. And so it was just a wonderful experience, but it was also proof to me how much he loved me and cared that I would be able to fulfill something of a dream and a vision. And you know, that dream and vision, it's never left me, but it has never, it's not here now. And we came through a time together. So I don't know if that helps or not, but it really does take a willingness on both parts. And if you can speak to your husband in terms of the Lord, I think it might would help. And if not, that's one of those situations, I think, where you should visit someone who could help along with that, to help him to see. Because you know what? The truth of the matter is, I think being a Christian woman in the world today is the most difficult role that there is. Because everything comes against us. If we're a mother, I was watching, I think it was Kasich from Ohio the other day had this. He was having a press conference, and I had the news on, and he said, I just appreciate all you homeschooling mothers and coming out of your kitchens and helping with the campaign. And this one woman stood up, and he said, yes. She said, do you realize that some of us don't homeschool and we don't come out of the kitchen? I mean, she was just hateful. Now, I didn't homeschool. I would have gone to about the 3rd grade level with the kids, and that probably would have been. Everything changed, the way you did math, the way you did everything. But it's been such a put down for women who aren't, out there chasing a career, even though we have the abilities to. And I'm not saying that it's bad for a woman to work. There's different circumstances that lead us different ways. But I have to look at the question again. Y'all, I get carried away, then I forget the question. Yes, going back to dreams and visions, it's becoming one. It is part of becoming one. And if both of us can see that, life's good. Why else would we get married if we get married just to have hell in our homes? I mean, how fun is that? No, you get married because somebody wanted to share your dreams and your vision. And just because you said I do does not mean that should ever stop. me see here what we have. I need help understanding submission, because right now it just seems like it's me feeling like I won't see any of my hopes and dreams come true if my husband doesn't agree. Okay. Submission is such a big, big issue. And it's something that I've had to walk through, learn, all of these things. We all do. But I can't remember if I read to y'all the other day, but the beginning of that whole Ephesians thing begins with, submit yourselves one to another out of reverence to Christ. Now that said, I don't know what that says to you, but it says to me that a spirit of submission is created in our home. That it's okay if we, have this idea, if we say this, if we even have a desire to do this, if we have an opinion. But there is a spirit that comes from the mother, the father, and I think even the children. Because sometimes kids can say things that you go, wow. The Lord is using those kids to speak through. Y'all have to look at the question again. Submission works both ways. It takes submission from a husband to love their wives. It is not just on our shoulders. And as Larry was teaching yesterday, when a husband is loving his wife, then submission has something to run to. But when it is just submission and no love, it's just a life of works. Just works. And that's miserable. It's like the couple I told y'all about the other day. That dear lady had lived under submission without love. And she couldn't, and after 40-some years, she couldn't do it anymore. She was broken. And all she wanted to do was work in a Bible bookstore. I mean, I don't think she's not going to go to heaven because of that. But submission is something that you and your husbands have to come together and create your identity in it. And one thing in that whole Ephesians passage that I love is that at the end it says, but husbands, make sure you love your wives. And then it says, but wives, make certain that you respect your husbands. Now, reading that, it means that I really can correct or have an opinion or say this is going all wrong, but I can do it in a respectful way. And I grew up in a home where Nikki asked me one day, she said, did you ever talk back to your mama? And I said, oh yeah, but I made sure 3 doors were closed behind me and my face was buried in a pillow when I did. I mean, respect was a part of the culture. It was a part of school. It was part of the stores you went into. It was just there. But now, when you talk about respect, it's almost like saying a foreign word. My mother was a brilliant businesswoman, unbelievable. In today's world, she would be a CEO probably. But as I've gotten older and look back, I can see how she did not disagree or go against my father in front of us. Now, did they have their ups and downs? Oh, yes. But that respect line was just kind of in our culture. It just kind of ran through the whole picture of life. But I think if you talk to your husband and you have dreams, you have visions, you have places that you're having a really hard time submitting to, that if you can have a beginning point of going there with respect and talking to him, because I see men in the workplace that when, women do not respect and everything, I just watch them. It's not a pretty picture. I watch television now. I watch commercials. It's always the men that are the stupid people. It really is. And it's just a shame. It is just a shame. But if you start out in submission with respect, when you don't agree or whatever else, I can tell you, you will get much further in it. You will go much further in it. And when your husband sees that, there's something in a man that when disrespect comes, it almost brings out a monster in them, but that's the way they're put together. With us ladies, it's when we're not loved. It's when we're not loved. And
That indifference word.
that indifference word, it's a killer. It is just a killer. We can't help it. God made us that way. So those two elements must come together for there to be, happiness. And I mean, that's why we got married, because we wanted to be happy, right? We wanted our home to be a haven, the world is hard enough on us. Christendom can be hard enough on us. But if we don't have somewhere to run, and God meant that to be our homes, then we are left dangling, hanging. That is a terrible, terrible feeling. Does that help with submission? Because, I've noticed even on talk shows how Christian women are put down because they say, oh, you just have to submit. And that is such a terrible word. But no, they don't go to the beginning of that passage. I never hear that part. I never hear the part about husbands, love your wives as your own bodies. And it goes on to say nobody hates their own flesh but loves and cherishes it. We don't hear that part. All we hear is that, well, these Christian women have to submit. No, it isn't that stark. It isn't that simple-minded, I should say. Not to be crass, but will there be a time or opportunity to discuss sexual matters if they are an issue in our marriage? This is the way Larry and I do this, because as he was telling yesterday about being in Africa, and that whole thing, what we like to do is to talk separately. Like I would talk to the wife, he would talk to the husband separately. And then we hear what is being said. Then Larry and I discuss the comments that were made, and then we bring the husband and wife back together with it. But sometimes I don't like to be in the room if a man is talking about sexual matters. I'm sorry, that's just not me. And but when you're able to separate it and bring it back together, you don't have to be so, so stark in it. Explicit, perfect word. And we're able to bring it back together, hopefully, in a good, healthy, spiritual way that can help in that area, because it is an important area in our marriages, and it's meant to be for marriage. Okay, how can I like a guy without becoming emotionally bound? How far is too far emotionally? This is a very good question. Here again, I'm not lifting up the culture I grew up in, but I think before, Larry and I say we were childhood sweethearts, but what we should really say is that we were friends first. And it wasn't like our parents said, you need to be friends first, or anything like that. It's just that we got to know each other on a friendship basis. And it was so fun. It doesn't mean I did not flirt with other boys. I can tell you that right now. It doesn't mean that we did not break up several times before we really did decide to get married. But when it came down to it, he's my friend. He really is. And when I'm so angry at him, I could spit nails. You know, after I've had some time to cool off, I realize, you know what? He is my friend. He is the one I run to. And that is developed over time. But for those you girls who are single, hold yourself to that place first. Hold yourselves to that place first. And then see what comes of it. Oh my gosh, when I first went off to college, I mean, Larry and I had been sweethearts forever, but wow. Went off to college and I was like, look at all these boys. I mean, you know, and some of them, the best looking ones, I remember if I would go out with them, I would think, yuck, just yuck. And then some of them that I would think, you know, oh, they're cute, but they just don't have that extra ooh la la, would end up being incredibly fun. And, you know, I could totally see myself liking them had it not been for Larry, even though miles separated us. But God has a way to bring you together. But when you begin at that, y'all will see when Larry talks about communication. Did he talk about that this morning? Oh, you'll get there. When you want to begin up here at the penthouse in a relationship, then when you fall, it's great as the fall instead of taking it like this. He will show you this wonderful picture of this entire thing. So all I can tell you is if your husband, if the guy you're interested in cannot be your friend, then after you're married, I mean, it's going to be a long, hard road. It just is. For whatever reason, we were able to do that, and it wasn't anything we planned. But I think a lot of couples in our day, that's the way it went first. I'm not saying all of them, but just kind of hold back. And if you've never had a guy as a friend, you're really missing something really special. That's why if you start off in the emotional zone, if you start off a relationship in that emotional zone, it hurts much worse if things don't work out. And quite frankly, it keeps you from getting to know that boy, and it keeps him from getting to know you. And to me, the greatest tragedy going on in the world today is that, you know, we've even bypassed emotional. So many just hop into bed together. They hardly know each other's name. There's no emotional tie. There's no anything. But for those girls who are trying to walk this out correctly, give yourself time to, and then let the emotional, see if there's an emotional part in him. Because, I mean, guys, I heard this young pastor one time say these words, and I will never forget it. He said, girls play with sex to get love. Boys play with love to get sex. And I think that's as old as time. And so you need to make sure that that young man's not just playing with you, and that you're not just playing with him to get something that you need, which is love. There's nothing wrong with that, but like everything in life, there's a right way to go about that in a wrong way. Do I believe in first loves, that you meet someone and you know? I do believe in that, but I still believe it needs to be walked out in a decent and right manner. It's a discipline. There's that nasty word again, discipline. You discipline yourself and say, you know what? I feel this, but I really need to get to know him. And I think that's more important in today's world than in any other time in history. And I think you've got to have your own self-esteem good self-esteem in order to walk this out.
Good point.
If you have a bad self-esteem, that is something you really need to keep running to people who can help you develop that good self-esteem, because then your vision for a guy will have to come higher when you think highly of yourself, and to know that God thinks highly of you. But that is a subject unto itself. But as long as you have that, that makes a huge difference. Huge, huge, huge. How far is too far emotionally? I think in the beginning stages, too far is when it's the emotional part that you're craving more than the friendship part. And you've got to have your antennas up, your spiritual antennas. Because, guys, like anything else, a guy or a girl can be shysters. Say it all really nice and kind and everything, but when it comes down to it, they don't think enough of you to really go along with what you request, but push you past a point that is not holy or right in God's sight. What do I do if I feel cynical towards getting married? Well, I would say, first of all, you need to understand that marriage isn't for everyone. The Bible clearly says some people aren't to be married. Your cynicism can come from seeing a bad marriage. I don't know. It can be that way. But I can tell you this. I've seen many cynical girls or young men who do stumble across that one that makes it really special, and you can't live without them, or you don't feel like you can anyway. But if you feel cynical towards marriage, then you've got to feel cynical towards God in a great degree. Because from the creation of Adam, it began with a marriage. Genesis begins with a marriage. And the very first command that God gives after creating Eve is a husband shall leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. We've done all that. And it ends in Revelation with a marriage between Jesus and the bride of Christ. So if you can check yourself, listen, the way we see marriages many times can make any of us cynical. But we have to remember that marriage was God's idea. It really wasn't ours. And as we do that, it helps us say, well, I'm going to look at this, try to look at this through God's eyes. Does that mean you're going to get the most perfect man in the world? No. Does it mean that you're not going to have those moments of being cynical in a marriage? You will. But it does mean that marriage is God's idea because it mirrors Christ in the church. And the other part of that is, if you're not called to be married, then you are still married to Christ. I really do believe that. And you're a follower of him. He had women who followed him and who helped pay the bills, however you want to say it. Susanna and, oh gosh, I can't even think of the names now. Phoebe? Was it Phoebe? That sort of thing. And I think one of them at least was a widow. But marriage is supposed to be good. And it's supposed to be a place that holds on to us and that gives us the ability to hold on. So if you want to talk about cynicism in marriage, come see me in my office. Okay, we're down to 2 ladies. Then y'all can have the rest of the afternoon, whether it's to be alone, get with your husbands, whatever. How have you balanced your independent spirit in your marriage? Well, you see scars on my tongue? Where I have had to bite it over and over again? Listen, I came from an independent background. I think especially those of us who were born post-World War II. I mean, they had fought. They had gone through the Depression. They had gone through the war. They had gone through all kinds of things. And my mother was an independent spirit, but she knew the line. She did know the line. But, you know, if I had not come to the Lord, I'm not kidding y'all, I would probably be on As the World Turns or As the Stomach Churns or whatever. I mean, you know, and not thought anything about, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. You want me to do that? No. But when I came to the Lord and I began learning, I'm telling you, it is not easy for someone like me. Some women, it's easy. My independent spirit, and through the years, and Larry has had to learn to work with me in those moments, but I will say this, I do know where the line is, and I have enough fear of God, even though my tongue is bleeding, to stop. To stop. Because I was an independent person. I believe I still am an independent person, but I love God. And I have such a fear of stepping out of His will. But I have seen Him also come in and fight for me on my behalf. I really have. We have been here 36 years. There have been times where I thought, you know, I really would like to go out there and get a job. I have wonderful abilities. I would love to direct a little theater. I would love to do these kind of things. It's in my heart. It always has been. Even when I knew I had to stop my life in professional theater. And it wasn't because Larry told me to. I knew that God was telling me, you will never be able to walk with me and stay in this. And I knew I couldn't. I think I could. Of course I could now. I'm so much older and everything. But my independent spirit would go out and be doing creative things. But as I said before, because I know if I did that, my husband would not be able to fulfill his dream, his vision, his call of God on his life. And really, it is the same, because it is on him, it is on me. And it's not like I don't have a call and all that kind of thing. I think I do. I know I do. But in the natural, yeah. I know for me, I know that it's been a cost, you know, to follow the Lord and to serve Him. I have had times like Ms. Hannigan and, you know, things like this that have come up that give me great pleasure and joy. But I would be lying if I sat here and told you ladies that, when I came to the Lord, I just have, you know, one thing I did want to do, I wanted to be there for my children. That was settled in me. When they went to school, in those days, they did not even have a music teacher. I went down, I had a gymnasium full of 180 kids that I taught music, and we did chapel programs. And I have found outlets out in the community where I could express myself. At the same time, I have seen people I work with on television through the years. And there is a cost in following the Lord. And like I said, I could have done it. I don't think Larry would have stood at the door and stopped me or anything like that. But y'all, I loved my husband. I loved my children. I have loved the Lord too much to do it. And to me, if there's not some kind of cost in following the Lord, I don't know what that would look like, to tell you the truth. I really don't. And I can give you many stories that happened to us, and where there were 3 different times. And I'll just tell y'all this. There were 3 different times. Larry mentioned it one time. My mother, we were living off the inheritance, the interest off my mother's, the interest off the inheritance I received from my mother. The man committed suicide. We lost everything. We had 4 children. Oh, the next thing that happened, the kids were reaching, Ellie was in the 8th grade, I think, and we realized we needed to get out of the inn. We'd lived here 8 years, but she was reaching, and they all were getting ready to go in those teenage years. We wanted them to have freedom to talk about whatever was going on at school and things like that. That's kind of hard when you've got missionaries sitting down at the table. Like the time, Larry's father at one time, I'll tell you this, owned all the liquor in Palm Beach, okay? So we would go down to see his father, yeah, and
Wait, he owned all the what in Palm Beach?
the liquor.
Oh, thank
The liquor
you.
stores.
I thought-
Okay, so we go down there, and he has a bar. It's a really nice bar, but it was red and it had tiger skins. It sounds chinky, but it was really done in very good taste. So we're sitting down there. This is when Larry and I decided we needed to move. Okay, we're sitting down there. There's this whole table of missionaries, and all of a sudden, Ellie's out of the blue. And if y'all knew Ellie, she's not like Nikki. She's not robust like Nikki is. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, Ellie sits there and she says, "Y'all should see my Paw Pete's bar. It is red all over, and it has tiger skins falling from the ceiling. And he has little Cokes that come in bottles this big, and he has all other kinds of different sizes bottles too, but I don't know what was in all them." And these missionaries were sitting there going, and Larry and I were going, ha, 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 ha. And that night when we were in our bedroom, Larry said, "Susan, it's time. We've got to, either God's calling us away from the inn or he's got to provide us with a home." To make a long story short, the man that owned the home right across the road called here that very week when Larry and I we were getting ready to start looking for jobs elsewhere, even away from Franklin. And I won't go into all the steps, but he gave the house right smack across from the inn. And we knew we were to stay. But anyway, we lived in that house. We were very happy there for 5 years. But anyway, the house was given. Then it came time for, we're going to have 4 kids in college. We did not want our girls to be in a school where the boys were in the girls' rooms and all this kind of thing. All we wanted was, we weren't even that interested in academics. The moral issues were more important for us. But this couple walks in here one day. Larry and I were looking to go, both of us to go get work, leave town, whatever. Okay, God, you've used us here this long. It's time to go. Couple walks in the front door of the inn. We'd help their family, and they give us all 5 years worth of money for our children's education. Now, Larry and I were standing there going, because we were getting ready to leave. I can't, when I talk about there's a cost in following the Lord, there really is. But when you're where He wants you to be, He sees to your needs. When everything else looks absolutely, there's no way. When you've lost everything, when your kids have needs, when you're wondering, how in heaven's name are we going to do this? And then the house up on the hill, that worked out for us. A man came in here, gave us the money that it would take to remodel that house, to winterize it, everything, so that because we needed a larger house at that time, which I'm not going to explain space and everything. It doesn't matter where you live as a family if you're happy. I can tell you that. So anyway, that is not a bragging thing. We had nothing to do with any of that. We just were ready to go. And he said, no, you're not. But we still live in that realm. I mean, really, ladies, there were times where I would think, well, I know we'll be here at least 1 month more. But I lived on the edge of not knowing if we were to stay here or go for a long time. And then little by little, as the Lord did these kinds of things, we knew, that He really did want us here. But I look on this place as, Jesus said, I leave the flock for the ones. And that's what I think we do here. That's our calling. I don't think we'll ever be on television or have a mega church or a big brass band or any of those things. But I tell you, when the ones walk in the door, it's like the calling comes out. Do any of y'all have any other questions? Oh, listen, our families, I mean, we were nutso to everybody. We really were nutso. But it didn't feel nutso to us. And I really believe one of the reasons we had to go through that terrible valley, and we've been through more than one valley, but nothing like that one, was because it speaks a different language. And you learn a language that you can speak with others. And that's very important. I don't think to serve God you have to go through the valleys and all these kind of things. But I do know this. I do know, all I could say to him, there have been many times I said, please, don't let this be for nothing. Don't let it be for nothing. Whatever happens, don't let it be for nothing. And he hasn't. If my dream of being married seems hopeless and unattainable, well, all I can tell you is that that's not true. I know probably who that came from.
You wrote that, didn't you?
It is a lie. It is a lie. Both of our girls, well, all 4 of our kids, they just got married later, and they felt that way. But don't let it drag you down. Don't let it get you into self-pity. All these kind of things, because it is God's will. If you are to get married, for you to marry somebody and to be happy with them. And the main thing is that you are right before the Lord, and sometimes after he makes special adjustments in all of us, all of a sudden it can happen in a moment's time. There he is. But don't despise the day of small beginnings. Do not despise it. Do not despise what he is doing in you right now. Yield to it. And in his time. And I wish I had had someone to sit down with me back when I was y'all's age. And but it just wasn't set up like that. The church was not set up like that then. Although I enjoyed my time growing up. I grew up in a Methodist church, but it was just a different day. This day, I was just reading this thing by Charles Dickinson, and he was saying, he was writing about that period of time during the French Revolution, and he was saying it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And I feel like in a way that's the way we live right now. But let's pray, and then we shall depart. And now that we have all this knowledge and everything. Oh, Lord, we are grateful. We're grateful that you're faithful, even when we don't think you are. Even when we think you've left us or whatever, Lord, you are showing yourself faithful, and we don't understand. But thank you. Thank you so much. I pray for each of these ladies here, the married ones and the unmarried ones, Lord. Each of us in this stage of life, whatever it is, we need you. We need your wisdom. We need to hear your voice. We need to hear you say, this is the way, walk in it. It may look crazy and everything else, but this is the way. So I pray that as we leave this circle, Lord, as we even leave this place in the next few days, that we will leave knowing that you know your eye is on the sparrow. And if it's on the sparrow, how much more is it on each of these dear women? In your precious name, amen.